Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Tanner Wolverton. I'm a specialist with CDBG. Thank you for watching the CDBG NEPA webinar. NEPA, or the National Environmental Policy Act, was signed into law on January 1st, 1970 by President Richard Nixon. The act ensures that environment is taken into consideration in planning and decision-making for any federal project or federally funded activity. It also mandates that each federal agency creates rules to carry out the act. CDBG is federally funded program, and as such, NEPA applies to all CDBG activities from small to large, including general administration. A CDBG application must demonstrate that the proposed activities are compliant with NEPA by submitting completed review documents. One is required for each activity and another is required for general administration. We will discuss specific requirements of the CDBG application later in the webinar. All documents mentioned in this presentation can be found as a resource on the HUD Exchange. For assistance in completing specific parts of an environmental review, a search on the HUD Exchange is very useful. Choice limiting actions. A choice limiting action is one that will prevent a project from receiving any federal funds. This includes any physical project activity or committing to an activity prior to completion of a SNEPA review, such as executing a contract. An exception is when a project, in good faith, began without the use or consideration of federal funds, but later decides to seek federal funds. At the point of consideration of federal funds and forward, any additional actions could be considered a choice limiting action without a proper NEPA review. I will now take you through the general NEPA review process and how it relates to a CDBG application. First, we define what the project is. Second, we choose the correct form based on what that project is. Three, we complete the form and collect source documentation. Four, we follow public outreach requirements if required. And five, the preparer and a certified environmental officer signs the form. And six, it is submitted along with source documentation via the application. To evaluate the full environmental impact of a project, the project description must be complete and clear. Include the maximum scope of the project regardless of funding source. For example, if one funding source is paying for internal portions of rehab and CDBG is paying for external portions of rehab, but they are the same project, the NEPA review must address both external and internal activities. In general, all actions contemplated on the project site within 5 years must also be included in the project description of the NEPA review. As a note, the CDBG activity and CDBG administration, general administration, are two separate activities and will have separate project descriptions and environmental reviews. Choosing the correct form. It's essential to use the correct form while completing the NEPA review for your project. If a project is not evaluated using the correct form, the NEPA review is not complete. There are three different forms published by HUD, a CNST, a CEST, and an EA. CENST stands for Categorically Excluded, Not Subject to. CEST is Categorically Exempt, Subject to. And EA is Environmental Assessment. They each correspond to project categories that can be found in the Code of Federal Regulation references on the slide here. CENSTs are generally used for activities that have a low or no environmental impact, including general administration activities, environmental studies, technical assistance and training, rental assistance, public and supportive services, and homeownership assistance. These project categories are defined by HUD regulations as referenced in the slides. CESTs are generally used for activities with a moderate environmental impact, typically reconstruction or repair of public infrastructure or residential, commercial, or industrial rehabilitation, where no or little change in building footprint will occur. EAs are used for when a project doesn't reasonably fit within any of the Code of Federal Regulation categories included in HUD regulations. This may include construction of a new building or infrastructure or expansion of an existing building beyond 20% of its original footprint. If you're unsure about which category your project falls within, please contact your CDBG representative. Each form template can be found on the HUD Exchange, as I discussed earlier. Here are the specific links for those forms. Each review form will have space to input a compliance determination, which is an explanation of how the project does or does not comply with various factors and federal laws, such as airport hazards, flood insurance, noise, and air quality, just to name a few. There must be a reasonable argument for why the determination was made and then backed up with source documentation. CENSTs will have fewer questions than CESTs, and CESTs will have fewer questions than EAs. So for each step you take, you have to answer more questions about compliance factors. Tiered reviews. A tier 1 review is a type of CEST review form for when specific project sites are not yet known. For example, in a housing rehab program, homeowner applications for rehab are approved after execution of the award with HCD. So therefore, you wouldn't be able to submit a fully complete CEST for those projects. For these types of programs, a Tier 1 review would be completed where all possible questions that can be answered without a specific site are completed. Questions that cannot be properly reviewed without a site are reviewed as they are known in a Tier 2 review. This type of CST review would be required for ED programs that involve grants or loans to businesses where the business can use the funds for construction activities. It would also be required for any housing assistance program where specific sites are not yet known, such as owner-occupied rehab. You can review additional information about tiered reviews on the HUD Exchange. Public outreach. Due to NEPA's goal of disclosing environmental impacts, public outreach may be required for certain NEPA reviews. CENSTs, once completed, do not require public outreach. Once the form is complete, source documentation is saved, and the form is signed, it can be included in the application and kept on file with the applying jurisdiction. A CEST only requires public outreach when environmental impact will occur or if compliance with the federal law is required. Otherwise, the same process as the CENST is followed. An EA will always require public outreach. However, all public outreach should occur after submission of the completed EA to HCD and approval by our environmental services team. The completed form and source documentation should be included with the application. One of the most important aspects of an environmental review will be the source documentation that backs up any determinations made. The HUD Exchange contains worksheets for each topic that must be addressed in an environmental review. These completed worksheets are required to be submitted with the application. All review forms must be kept with corresponding source documentation. Other acceptable forms of documentation include screenshots or printouts of websites, published studies, or other studies commissioned for the environmental review itself. There are several resources to assist with documentation, including NEPA Assist by the EPA. . Signatures. The signature section is an important step in completing an environmental review form. The form is not complete unless both signatures are present. The first signature is for the preparer of the form, such as the staff member or consultant who wrote the document. The second signature is for the person authorized on Section 6 of the resolution, or otherwise known as the certified environmental officer. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, please review Chapter 3 of CDBG Program's Grant Management Manual, which is available as a tab on our program website. Additionally, you may contact us at cdbg@hcd.ca.gov. Please also consider following us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone.